Hello, this is Simply Psych, and today I'm going to be doing a WeakAuras tutorial video. Now this video is going to be a little more jolted and messed around because I'm going to do it as much in one shot as I can. Usually I do footage and then I record audio in the background. So we're going to skip into just recording this all at once because there's a lot of moving parts. The idea of this tutorial is going to be to give you basic knowledge on how to design a WeakAuras setup for yourself. It's going to be as in-depth as I know it. I just started using this program about 2 weeks ago, so I'm not as familiar with this add-on as I am with others, but I'll go ahead and give you as much knowledge as I have on it. Of course, there will be a link in the description to where you can get the add-on and install it. Outside of that, in order to bring up WeakAuras, you're going to want to go ahead and do /WA in the chat window, hit enter, and it'll bring up this menu. Now, it's a good idea to have an idea of what you want out of WeakAuras before you begin. However, that's not always possible. If you don't know what it can do, then you might not know what you want it to do for you. So I'm going to show you a very basic setup first that just takes my icons that I have here on Bartender and replicates them, and it only shows them up whenever I need them. So going with that in mind, I need Moonfire, Sunfire, Solar Watch, Solar Wrath, Star Surge, Full Moon, Incarnation, and Lunar Strike. Now, to start out, we're going to see if each of these have a template or not. Some do, some don't. If they don't, we'll go to an icon. So let's start with Moonfire and go from template. Next, we're going to want it to be an icon, and we're going to want it to be default size, just to start with. We'll resize it later. Moonfire is the debuff, and there it is. So that's going to tell us that we show Moonfire, and you can see that we now have an icon here. So on display, we're going to want to have the number that represents our hotkey, and that's going to be 1. So over here in text, delete out what's here, and hit 1. And then I like to have everything on the top right, just because that's how it is on your normal bars. So I change that to top right. Then we're going to want to resize this so that it fits. I believe the default size is 35 by 35. Let's check that. Looks about right. Move it into position to where it's over the Bartender. Okay, that worked. So now we have it in position. We're going to want to make sure that we have it show up when we need it. Now we only need to see Moonfire whenever our target doesn't have Moonfire. So let's go about setting that up. That's going to be listed on our trigger. So what's our trigger? Okay, so when the aura Moonfire is on the target, and it's only our own, that's important. We don't want to worry about other druids, balanced druids showing up and affecting when it shows up on it for us. We want it to be inversed. Activate when the given aura is not found. Okay. That should be all we need for this particular one. Let's move it over to the side just to make sure that it's acting correctly. That's why we're here at the target dummy. Okay, so that dummy, see now I'm not targeting anything, so that I don't see this little icon that we just created. I target it, it doesn't have Moonfire, so it shows up. Go ahead and hit 1, and now it disappears. So that's functioning correctly. Next are going to be some minor tweaks that we want to do. So let's go back into the Moonfire. Trigger's correct, but let's talk about loading. Now, personally, I like to only have it load when I'm actually in combat. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. And another thing that I like to do is to make sure that it only shows up whenever it's usable. So what I'll do is create a second trigger, add trigger, type status, action usable, and then we gotta type in Moonfire here, hit OK, and it requires a valid target. This will just make sure that we're in range and that the target we're against is actually something we can attack. So let's go ahead and test that. So now it's not showing up because I'm not in combat, and it's not going to show up because this grunt here I can't attack. So I hit 1. Let's let it tick off. Let's see, watch it up there. And it should reappear to the left of my action bar currently. whenever this drops. And there it's back. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and set up Sunfire is exactly the same, so I'm going to skip past that and have it set up. Okay, so now that we have those two set up, with Balanced Druid, the next thing you need to do is set up your Solar Wrath. Now, Solar Wrath should be used whenever you have no other spell that you currently need to be using in your rotation. So that basically means that we need this one to show up whenever it's usable and we have a valid target. So that's a pretty simple one. We'll go ahead and go to icon, type in Solar Wrath, hit enter, set up our display, 3, top right, 35, 35, and the trigger is going to be a status, action usable, Solar Wrath, requires valid target. Alright, so we move this into place, right underneath this 3. And that is good to go. Okay, so next we need to do Star Surge. Now Star Surge, we only want it to appear when we have enough astral power to use. So go to new, icon, trigger. First we do want to make sure that it's usable. Okay. Requires valid target. So now it's only going to appear when it's usable, which is exactly what we want. Now I did try to set this up to where it would only show up if it was usable and I didn't have 3 empowerments of Solar Wrath and or Lunar empowerment, but for whatever reason I couldn't quite figure that out. If anyone knows how to get that to work, please let me know in the comments. So again, you move it to the right there. $35, $35, and move this down to the bottom here. So 3 and 4 are basically the same setup. Okay, so this also applies to full moon. We want it to show up anytime we can use it. We also want this to show up anytime that we can use incarnation. And for Lunar Strike, it's a little bit different. So I'm going to skip when we get up to Lunar Strike. I'll be right back with you. Okay, while I was setting up the full moon rotation here, I realized that I was slightly off. You want to make sure that you use new moon as a spell name. Full moon or half moon will cause it not to cycle correctly. And make sure that you have the charges set to equal to or greater to 1 in the trigger. And then it will cycle through correctly. Just one tiny difference that you want to make in setting up the trigger. You still want to make sure it's action usable, but then you want to also make sure that you have charges set to greater than or equal to 1 and new moon set as the spell name, not full moon or half moon. But it does work once you do that. Once you have that set, you can move it into place. So I'm going to go ahead and set up incarnation and move on from there. One note with the incarnation, you want to make sure that you type in celestial alignment in case you ever change your loadout here, but it will automatically change it to whatever you want, and then it should work for you just fine otherwise. Okay, that leaves us with Lunar Strike. And yes, I know I misnamed this as Lunar. We can change that. But I'm just going to leave it as is. Okay, so next we need to set up Lunar Strike here. And Lunar Strike we only want to show up if we have 3 charges of Lunar Empowerment. And of course if it's usable. So let's go to icon. Set up the size. Set up the number. First we're going to make sure that it's usable. And it is important that you use the usable one first. add a second trigger. For this trigger, we want it to be an aura. Lunar empowerment on the player with the stat count greater to or equal to 3. Own only. So now what should happen is this button should only appear when I have 3 stacks of lunar empowerment. So let's test that and make sure that it worked. It's going to spam Solar Wrath. Alright, there's 1 stack. Let's see my count there. There's 2. And 3, and it appears. Perfect. So now this is all set up. We just gotta move it back into place. For example, let's say that I want my health to display as WeakAuras. I can do that. Go to progress bar, and let's just do HP as the name. We only want it to display in combat. Well, we're gonna keep it up at all times here, just while we're doing the testing. So we'll set status, health. Anytime that we have 0 or more health. And let's just test that out and see if it worked. That should be all we need to do. Yep, there we go. And now I have a health bar as a WeakAuras. Now the reason that you might want to do that instead of your normal health bar, which you see I don't actually have other than the status bar that comes up below your character, is that you can customize the way this looks a little more. You can take it to where you can remove the name from it if you don't want to see, if you know who you are. You can remove. Let's make sure that works this time. Click OK. Sorry about that. It doesn't seem like I can actually make this blank, so that's fun. Okay. But you can go ahead and like resize it. You can animate it to where at the start maybe it bounces when you get into combat, or it fades in, and it fades out when you're in combat, or you're out of combat. You can't predict your, you can't have it predict your incoming heals, but you can do your absorbs. But that's one thing you might want to do with it. You can also add your power bars. So artifact power, or astral power for druid, you can set one up that predicts how much you're going to have after a spell and all that, and set them up around your UI. Now, if you'd like to see a more in-depth video on this, showing some of those other features, I can certainly put one together. For my own personal purposes, all I really do is set up the icons like you're seeing right now that pop up when I need them. I find that I don't really need to track my cooldowns or the duration on things outside of I can see my dots up here, and if I don't have this my incarnation here as a boomkin, if I don't see it up there, then I know I need that it's off cooldown, or it's on cooldown, and if it's up there, then I can use it, and I just use it when I need it. So I don't really have to think too much about it. I can just see what spells are up here and use them. One thing I might change is the order of the spells to where they reflect the priority better, because my moon spells should really be moved up further, but you can apply this to other character classes too. Just look into how the rotation affects and start thinking about it. If you have a dot, then you know you don't want it to show up on your bar whenever the enemy already has them. Just replicate what I did with Moonfire and Sunfire. Pretty much any spell you don't really want to show up unless it's usable. There's no point in seeing something you can't use. If you have something that is only you should only be using a certain amount of charges, just reflect what I did with Lunar Strike here. So that's kind of the basic setup of WeakAuras in general. You can definitely apply to other classes. I've set one up with my Beastmaster and one with my Demonology Warlock as well. So if you'd like to see more on some of the more in-depth features of WeakAuras, I can definitely do some research on my own, see what else I can put together, and make another video next week on those. Other than that, please do the needful, like, comment, and subscribe.